Hello, Teacher Ed YouTube. I am here with Dr. Joel Amidon, one of our amazing professors here at the School of Education. Thank you so much for sitting down with me today.
Thanks for having
I
me.
know you have a pretty busy schedule, so we appreciate it.
Hey, it's Friday.
Yes,
We'll
I
live it
know.
up.
It's a bit of a ghost town in
Exactly.
Guiding today. So, where are you from originally, and what inspired you to go into education?
I'm from Wisconsin, as you see
Yes.
from my Wisconsin, my share of Green Bay
Yes.
Packers stock, or my Rose Bowl picture, which I'm in
Yes.
here somewhere. But yeah, northern Wisconsin, northwest central Wisconsin, closer to the Twin Cities than like Milwaukee or anything like that. So it's a very wooded, hilly area of Wisconsin, and a lot of cows, a lot of cheese, all that good stuff. And yeah, so I just went to school there, went to the University of Wisconsin, got all my degrees there, and eventually it was like, oh, if I'm going to be a professor, I probably can't stay here. So I ended up here in Mississippi.
Yes. So, what brought you to Ole Miss specifically?
A job.
Yeah.
I say that, but
yes.
Looking for a good fit, right?
Yeah.
And so a place that I could do research. I like doing research. The University of Wisconsin prepared me to do research, but I love to teach. And there's some positions out there that the professor type positions where almost like success looks like teaching less, and I don't like that. Like I want to interact with students. I want to teach my classes. I want to get a chance to be in schools, and this was a great fit, not just for me, but also for my family. No one else in my family had touched Mississippi before I accepted the position. So when we came here and were welcomed fully, it was an amazing fit from the beginning. And now we've been here since 2011. So
yes, that's great.
Yeah.
So tell me a bit about what your pathway was through your degree process. Kind of what was your first degree up to your doctorate?
Okay. Yeah. So I took 5.5 years to get my undergraduate degree. It was a lot of different variations of majors. I won't get into all of them, but there was a computer science thing to start and some other pathways. But eventually decided that I wanted to be a high school math teacher, and it just so happened that Wisconsin, and I didn't know this, like it was just like the institution that I wanted to go to, and it just happened that Wisconsin was at the center of a lot of major math ed stuff that was happening, like the standards, NCTM, the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics. There was journals that were started. There was major research projects happening. There's a lot of big names in math education that got their degrees at Wisconsin that went all over the place, and I didn't know that. But, so I mean, I had really great training to start, and I got exposed to a lot of good stuff, like some curricula that were like cutting edge curriculum, and that was part of my like practicum experience, was using that stuff, and it was like opened my mind to like, oh, this is what the teaching of mathematics could be. So got my first teaching position, and at that teaching position too, it wasn't just traditional teaching of mathematics. It was like group teaching. It was the truly guide on the side sort of stuff, where students are doing problems in mathematics and I'm helping, I'm facilitating, but they're really working together and coming up with like deriving the distance formula and seeing how it's connected to the Pythagorean theorem, and like matrix multiplication, which was just a mystery to me, and that was almost a math major, and they like figured it, and they're like, oh, it's this, and this, and that's why it makes so much sense. I'm like, it never made sense to me.
Right.
And it was amazing to see what they could come up with. And then that, and being a teacher, you want a paycheck, and you want a better paycheck. So my wife found this program. It was kind of hybrid online face-to-face program. It was kind of an extension of my undergraduate degree, working with some similar professors in a master's program in educational psychology. So I did that, and then that, you're in the class with a professor, and they give you a nudge, and they say, why don't you come get a doctorate? I'm like, they could have nudged me and said, why don't you go to the moon? And I'm like, and it was like, I didn't like understand like what would that even mean? Why? I didn't see that on the salary scale, like PhD. But why would I do that? And then I remember it was actually kind of right around now. It was like, and it was probably about I'm a little coming out of being sick, and I remember I felt sick, and I had this call with a professor, Mary Louise Gomez, who gave me that nudge, and she talked to me about what does it mean to be a professor, and about taking some of the things that I'm already doing in my classroom and maybe get a chance to broaden the influence, right? Broaden your blast zone, for lack of a better term, and not only teach, but teach teachers. And I was like, well, that sounds pretty good. And then so I had a chance to go back and work with Alice Uvari-Solner. She was the teacher that every student took at Wisconsin that taught you about inclusive education, like truly inclusive education, and was her teaching assistant for a bit, got to be a supervisor and stuff while I was going through my program. Eventually did my dissertation on teaching mathematics as agape, or unconditional love, and with lots of influences from thinking about teaching math for social justice from Rico Gutstein, and culture relevant pedagogy from Gloria Ladson-Billings, and all that sort of stuff. And then finished that up, and as soon as I finished and deposited that thing, we moved to Mississippi.
Yes.
So, yeah.
So it's pretty much been nonstop for you ever since.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy how long we've been here, but like the work that we'll be able to do, yeah, it's kind of continuous. So it's like I can still connect myself to those experiences, and it seems crazy how much has happened since then.
Yeah, for sure. Well, one thing here, I'm sure every junior who is in a fall semester EDCI class has recognized your name from our teacher education portfolios. So you've kind of worked to standardize those to be fully online. So tell me a bit about how that process came about and the work that you've done with that.
Yeah. And again, I'll point back to my experience in Wisconsin. I had to create a similar portfolio when I was an undergraduate, 2002, and they were just piloted. A new law had been passed, and they knew that just, taking some tests was not enough. They wanted to create reflective teachers. Because if you have reflective teachers, like, they're going to go out, they're not going to be perfect. But if they have the practice of being reflective, they're going to do something, be like, that wasn't the best. There were some good things, there were some bad things, but now I know how to make it better. And so you have this constant improvement happening. And so we want our teachers to have that same practice. And if you go to any syllabus or you walk around the halls of Guyton, you'll see the conceptual framework right in the middle. It's about educators as reflective professionals. And basically the portfolio is just a way to document your growth as a teacher. And that's the emphasis. And I know that there's some things where there is a technical side. You're creating a site, have to, find documents or find an argument. But really all you're doing is identifying moments of growth as a professional and then tying an artifact to it. And the metaphor I've been coming up with lately is like, if you go on a trip, right? Have you gone on a trip lately?
Yeah.
Did you get a souvenir?
I did.
What was a souvenir?
I got a snow globe at the Matterhorn.
There you go.
Yeah.
Now, that snow globe is not your experience,
yes,
right, at the Matterhorn, but it just represents it, right? When you look at it, you're like, that was a good time,
right?
Right, and so it represents that moment, and that's all we're doing is like we're identifying moments and we're connecting an artifact to it. So if it's just having a student the other day in class, she did this awesome little teaching lesson, little 10-minute teaching lesson, and she had this major aha of, I want my students to do more. So I did too much for them here, but I think if I pulled back a little bit, this would be even though the lesson was good, and it was good, she's like, if I pulled back a little bit more and they struggle a little bit more, they're going to get more out of it. And that's a moment, right? Yes. And so what could it represent that moment? It could be her lesson plan, could have been the slides she created, could have been a little reflection that she wrote in a journal. And like, that's a powerful moment to think like, wow, she knows her students are capable, that her pedagogy can improve by doing less, which that's a big aha, right? And so, and like now she can represent that in her portfolio, or not to, because that's the thing about the portfolio. It's hers, not ours. I can't tell her what to do. And so that's also, there's some constant struggle and tension with it, because sometimes we like being told what to do. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it, and that's tough. So it's like, coming up and identifying what those moments are is, what we're starting with our 352 folks right now is like, hey, let's start thinking about what's your philosophy? What do you stand for? And put some words behind it. And then, have it so that you can carry it with you. So create a little pocket-sized version of it. And so that's kind of those elementary steps that we're taking right now.
Yes, it really is. It's a great streamlined process. I'm in 352 now, so we've been dealing with getting them all set up, but it really has.
Are you Dr. Monroe's class?
I'm with Dr. Brady, actually.
Okay. But I'll be in Dr. Monroe's class on Monday, whatever.
Yes.
So,
it's been a super streamlined process. Okay. So we are thankful for all the work that you've done on it.
Thank you.
So not only have you poured a lot into our students here at the School of Ed, you've also worked a lot with some of our faculty members, especially the newer. So could you tell us a little bit about kind of the work that you and Dr. Monroe have been doing?
Yeah, and it's not really that. So like this is where Dr. Monroe and I meet here. Actually, I usually sit there. She sits here. She thinks these things are uncomfortable. They're actually from an old restaurant here in town, old booth. But anyway, we call this the Bat Cave. So she's Batman, I'm Robin, and we get stuff done right here. And one of the things that we thought of in the Bat Cave was we had a lot of new faculty coming in, and how do we support them, right? Because we were both new faculty at the time, and there's just a lot of like mystery about academia. It's kind of a weird space, outside of being a new teacher, where there's like, where's the copy machine? How do you copy codes? How do you work with a GA? Like all those like kind of like logistical sorts of things. But then there's stuff like faculty activity reports and like what should you be spending your time doing? Because some folks that are new faculty, they're in this tenure and promotion process where this kind of stressful, where if you don't get that, you're got to kind of move on. And it's kind of, again, it's a weird world. And so all we basically have done is created like a common meeting time where we invite anyone that's on that path, that newer faculty that are on this promotion or tenure track, and we invite them together. Dr. Monroe usually bakes some delicious treat, and then we just get together for an hour and we just talk. And so usually we'll try to prompt and like say, hey, we're going to meet. Does anyone have any questions you want to come up? Or we also know too, like the first time they have to do faculty activity reports, which is just basically saying like, document and communicate what you've done over the year so that, one, that what you did, but then also that those that are evaluating you know what you did as well. And those are all part of and also do kind of take a moment to reflect on your teaching too as well. Look at your teaching evaluations and whatnot, and, all the projects and papers and presentations and service you've done. And that's a complicated process. And so like just sitting down on a Friday, calm, you got some coffee, you got a sweet treat, and being able to ask questions and talk together, because a lot of them have the same questions, right?
Yes.
And it just eases things up. Knowing that space is available to come and ask questions, I think works for everyone. I mean, I do the same, and we've done similar things with our like people that are going through dissertation. We're just having a regular time to meet where I have a time to ask questions, where it's a safe place to ask questions. Like there's no stupid question. Like, hey, how do I do? How do I get money for travel? Like, where do I talk to? Like, who do I talk to? And it's just a lot of where, who, how, what, and that. I mean, it's nothing complicated. It's just like creating the time and space for us to come together and ask questions, and get them answered. And Dr. Monroe and I have been blessed enough. Like we've gone through the whole like we're full professors. Like we've kind of have gone through it all. And so now we can think like, okay, how do we help them have a little bit straighter path than we did? Yes. And so that's what we want to do.
I think that's something really neat about Guidon Hall in general and the teacher ed department is that everyone is so, how can we help the next generation have it even better than we had it? I mean, it truly is unlike any other building on campus.
Well, you've been doing that too a little bit, Seth, with your podcast, right? I mean, like trying to like, hey, like, let's share some knowledge. Like, let's not make it a secret. Let's make the hidden curriculum less hidden, right? So,
it's something in the air in this building specifically that just
teachers, right?
Yeah, a bunch of teachers, everyone.
Right. Yeah.
Every door, if it's open, you can go in and be like, hey, I have a question real quick. Can you please help me with this?
Right.
So
perfect. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
So you've of course done a lot here, but also you've been traveling quite a bit recently. So
Yeah.
tell us kind of what you've been up to and about some of your things outside of Ole Miss.
Yeah. So when you get to a certain point, again, some of the things you do outside of the university is like doing presentations. So like the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, when I was a undergrad, there was a regional conference for NCTM in Madison, Wisconsin, and my advisor invited me to go. And ever since then, I've been a member of NCTM, and I've had either through local affiliates or the national conference, like invited, or even regional conferences, invited my students to come with me to those sorts of meetings. And so we presented on the teaching groups. So if anyone has seen the stuff that we do in my either EDCI 353 class or my 403 class, it's something where there's small group teaching. It's happening all at the simultaneously 6 groups all at a time. And it's where you get to, again, a safe place to practice teaching. Well, we presented on that at the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics in late September. So we did that. We did a similar presentation in late October for the Mississippi Council of Teachers of Mathematics. And at both of those things, I had students from the University of Mississippi join me in those presentations, which is fun to present with students that have experienced it, but then they get to interact with these other either teachers or professors. They get to see what we're doing. That was one. I'm also the member of 2 boards, well, 3 boards, but 2 of them met. Actually, all 3 of them met in October, but one is the Association of Mathematics Teacher Educators, so other teachers of math teachers. I'm the vice president for communications and outreach, so which is does a number of different things there. But that board had a retreat in Denver. I also was I'm a new member of the Knowles Teacher Initiative Board, which we've had a couple of Mississippi grads that have been Knowles Fellows. So Austin Jones, he's teaching down at the coast. He's a Knowles Fellow. And then Jessica Peralta, that was way long ago. She student taught at, and I think she was a teacher at Oxford High School too for a bit. They were both Knowles Fellows, and that was how I got connected. And I was one of the people that helped select Knowles Fellows, and I've been, kind of always connected to that organization. And now I've been invited to be a part of the board. And so they're rethinking what the fellowship looks like, but they also do professional development and academies, all from this guy, Harry Knowles, who really believed in teachers as change agents, as powerful leaders in our society, and he wanted to invest in high school math and science teachers. And so his legacy continues on. He's unfortunately passed away, but they're still thinking about how do we, take the funds that he has given and think about how do we develop those next leaders of science and math and science and mathematics. Yes. And then finally, I was a fun little very quick trip to Cleveland, Ohio. There was some colleagues that I graduated, they graduated from their PhD programs the same year I did, and I was part of a fellowship program with them called STAR, Service Teaching and Research in Math Education. I got a little handkerchief of it up there in the corner. Anyway, 2 of my colleagues from that organization had got a National Science Foundation grant to look at validity in math education measurements. And so it sounds weird, but it was like this whole conference on validity and how do you know, and basically it's like how do you know, like a ruler measures distance, and we know it does a good job of measuring distance up to like a foot, right? And so we have all these tests and assessments and things that we'll use in research, or things that are just out in the things that we use in research, things that are used to provide teachers with more information. How do we know that they're good? Yes. And so basically this was they created this repository to look, or kind of basically a website that collects all the different studies that people have done to say like this specific measure is a good one, which is good for us as research. And so I run a doctoral program here. And so if we have math education folks and there's stuff beyond math education that are trying to find a good ruler to use for their study, here's a place where not only can you find the rulers, but you can see how good they are.
Yes.
And so it was good to get
That's
trained
huge.
on it. And the fact that I can actually, I think, explain it in a
Yeah,
somewhat
right.
clear way means that the training was pretty good too. So
Yes.
that was the last trip I took last week.
That is really nice, especially as someone who's kind of thinking about like capstone things right now and research projects that need those measurement tools.
Yeah.
Like, that would be a great resource for.
Yeah. Well, even in my so I think what we're going to do in 353, one of the measures that I've known for a while, but I think would be cool that undergraduates could use and teachers could use is one called Equip, where you look at some video and you keep track of participation, and then you already have cataloged in some of the demographics that you notice. And you see, like, do I have any patterns, right?
Yes.
Do I have any biases that I might not be aware of, but now I can see it because I did this little tracking of my teaching, and I can see, like, what kind of questions am I asking, or like what kind of question, who am I asking what kind of questions? And so, like, there could be some things like, some sensors could get flipped on, like, how can I be a better teacher of all my students? And
Absolutely.
So I'm thinking about that.
Yes.
So,
I love it.
Yeah.
So finally, you have a podcast. So tell us a bit about that and where people can find you.
Yeah, so I got 3 podcasts.
Yes.
I just can't help myself. So it started with the Amidon Planet podcast, which was just I like listening to podcasts. I got a dog, walk the dog, like listen to podcasts, so I do that. And so, I listen to podcasts, and a lot of times they're focused in on business, right? Yeah. And so some of the things that it was always like business, and I always like. And sometimes in some of those business books, they'll connect something to education, but it's always back to business and kind of a capitalist sort of bent to it. And I'm like, well, what are some of these things that are really good books, like some classic books? Like, what do they mean for the education? So like Atomic Habits or Cal New by James Clear, or Deep Work by Cal Newport, or When is a book by Daniel Pink. And like all these sorts of books, I was like, well, what does this mean for teaching better? Like, what are some lessons learned? So really at the beginning, it was just, what are lessons that we can take from those texts and think about teaching better? And then, as we know, like in teaching, we're always smarter together. So having more conversations with people has become a better thing. So like, for example, just inviting folks on. So I've had Dr. Monroe on a couple of times. We've talked about some books and some things that we've done about teaching better. And then some of the big ones. Have you ever seen the movie The Martian?
Yes.
I had the author of The Martian, Andy Weir, on the podcast, because if you think about the book The Martian, or the movie, whichever you've seen, like all the problems that he's solved, it's all problems, and they're all messy type problems, just like teaching is kind of a messy type problem. What are the things you do? Like, to solve this problem, get to this problem, to get to this problem. And it's like the kinds of things I want my students doing in their math classrooms. So I had them come on and talk about, 1, how do you write such things? But 2, like, what do you think about problem solving and stuff like that? And so, and again, lessons for how to teach better.
Yes.
Also had the podcast host, Rob Harvilla. He's on the podcast 60 Songs That Explain the 90s.
Yes.
Which you might not be aware
of.
For me,
parents are very big fans of that podcast, actually. That's the road trip podcast.
Oh, yeah. So I've had him on twice because he wrote a book. So I had him on to come talk about the podcast, and he talked about the book. And so, again, just talking about, he's teaching me about the 90s, and I lived it. And like, but then how does he do it in a way, and his podcast evolved over time, and like the lessons that he learned and how to teach better throughout, where he connects more to his own experiences, and like, it's not just about, the artist that he's talking about, but it's about how he experienced the artist, and that helps us learn more about that experience too. And so, like, again, there's lessons to be learned there. So that's Amidon Planet. Then there's Math Teaching, which is about helping new math teacher educators, which is what I am. I teach math teachers, right? And so helping new math teacher educators tap into expertise and advice from more experienced math teacher educators. We have, like folks like, we just had Jackie Leonard on, who's this legend in math teacher education. And she came on and shared some of the advice and experiences that she's had. And then also just promoted some things that she's working on. And so it's a nice little podcast. That's probably the most popular podcast I have. We're like the number 1 math teacher education podcast in the world, Seth.
Oh, that is really
And then the last one is The Road to Better Teaching.
Yes.
And that podcast is just about basically documenting those stories of teacher development that we talked about with the portfolios. Like, you've had a growth moment, which maybe, Seth, maybe this is an invitation to have you on to talk about, hey, what's one moment that you've had in growing as a teacher? And then we have people talk about it. So we have current, like, Students Week. We had Lauren Biondo on recently, Joe Sweeney, Dr. Joe Sweeney on. So we've had folks that have been teachers for a long time. We have very new teachers, and we have them tell a story that models and parallels what you're doing in your portfolio as a way to, like, okay, that makes sense. That I can resonate with that story versus, like, you know, just seeing it as a website and whatnot. Right. Like, hey, here's a podcast, here's a live person talking about something that I can relate to. Yes. And so now this daunting thing of documenting my growth as a teacher. Oh, that it doesn't have to be these huge things. It can be these little things. So those are the 3 I've been working on.
Yes.
So.
Well, all of them sound great. You know,
I think and you can find them all.
Yes.
I mean, anywhere you get podcasts, you can find them all. So Teaching Math Teaching, The Road to Better Teaching, and Amidon Planet.
Yes. I mean, definitely lots of good stuff. And, you know, everything kind of fit any major could really get something from each of them.
Oh, yeah.
You don't have to be a mathematics major to at least learn a little bit about teaching.
Yeah. Well, we had the recent one that I have on is Joe Jackson. So if anyone has Amy Jackson as an instructor, Joe Jackson is her husband. But he's a theater teacher, and they're right now doing theater and dance instructor, but instructional assistant professor across campus. And they are doing Cinderella, and this summer they did Oklahoma. Yes. And I went and watched Oklahoma, and I'm like, how do you do this? There's probably a lot of great teaching that's going on. We've got something to learn. And I had him on to talk about it. It was amazing. I mean, he's an interesting guy, and so again, lessons learned. So.
I know. I always say that my theater background is like what helps me become a better teacher, because I mean, it definitely just those little you pull from different experiences.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for talking with me today. I think there's been lots of great things that we've discussed.
Awesome.
Kind of been all over, but you know, that's what we're trying to do.
That's my life, Seth. Yeah, all over the place.
Get a full little portfolio of every professor here.
Yeah, yeah.
So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me.